Today we're going to be discussing the psychology of the permanent war mindset. There is a reoccurring pattern in modern American foreign policy, a worldview often associated with neoconservative thought that seems almost structurally comfortable with prolonged conflict in the Middle East. The question isn't simply political, it's psychological. At the core of the neoconservative mindset is a deep belief in American primacy, the idea that global stability depends on the overwhelming U.S. dominance, not balance, not multipolarity, dominant. From that perspective, instability isn't always a failure of policy. Sometimes it seems as proof that American force is still required. This creates a paradox in which, if a peace breaks out organically, it reduces the justification for forward military posture. If adversaries reconcile regionally, it weakens the argument that only Washington can referee the world. So conflict, or at least tension, becomes strategically useful. Psychologically, this is rooted in three drivers. First, threat of inflation. When the policymakers consistently interpret rival states as existential dangers, every negotiation looks like appeasement. Every de-escalation looks like weakness. The brain becomes wired for worst-case scenarios. Diplomacy feels risky, and force feels safe. Secondly, moral absolutism, where the neocons' ideology often frames conflict as battles between good and evil. That moral clarity simplifies complex regional politics and into binary struggles. But when every opponent is cast as irredeemable, compromise becomes betrayal, and war becomes perpetual. Third, the identity is through the intervention. For some strategic cycles, American identity itself is tied to projecting the power. If the U.S. is not actively reshaping our regions, toppling regimes, or deterring adversaries, then it's seen as declining. Intervention becomes not just policy or relevance, And here's the psychological trap. Once you invade decades into a region, militarily withdrawing feels like admitting those sacrifices didn't produce the promised transformation. So the mission evolves, an objective shift, and the enemies rotate but the posture remains. It also becomes a self-sustaining system. Defense contractors also benefit. Political reputations are built on hawkish credibility. The media ecosystems amplify the threat narratives. The think tanks produce reports reinforcing the need for engagement. Over time, the ecosystem normalizes permanent tension. And that doesn't mean every advocate of strong foreign policy wants war. Many genuinely believe deterrence prevents something worse. But structurally, the incentives lean toward escalation over restraint. And the Middle East becomes a theater where demonstrating resolve matters more than achieving closure. And the result? Well, the wars rarely end cleanly. Ceasefires what feel temporary, enemies that morph but never disappear. The deeper psychological question isn't whether the conflict is something necessary. History shows us it can be. The question is this: at what point does a security doctrine designed to prevent instability begin to require instability to justify itself? That's the tensions at the heart of the matter and the permanent war mindset. And until that psychological framework shifts from dominance to balance, from moral absolutism to strategic realism, the cycle is likely to continue. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.